Hey everyone, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel. So just going over the news and helping you stay informed of everything that's going on around the world. So first, I just want to go over core CPI or core inflation. The basic gist is that this is the read, right? Consumer Price Index, the read of like how much stuff costs without food and energy. You're also going to hear headline, which is headline CPI, headline inflation, which basically what's the cost of everything. And basically what happens is that the Federal Reserve looks at the cost of stuff and then they decide, okay, what do we want to do with interest rates? Where do we think prices are going on stuff that you do every single day? Some of the stuff that's included in this prices are like housing, so this would be like your bedroom furniture. It's like a lot of interesting knickknacks. Haircuts are in here, tobacco's in here, eyeglasses are in here, television, toys, college tuition, just prices of all kinds of stuff to get a sense of like where are prices going in the economy. And then the gist of it is that because energy can go up and down quite a bit, and same with food can go up and down quite a bit, you often want to get a read on core. Now, headline read this week, because I think we're getting a CPI read this week, I believe headline will most likely be down because prices at the pump are down. Here's the however. Remember I said that energy is volatile. Come winter, right? Energy prices could spike. I mean, there's a high possibility that because of, say, shortage of energy, because it gets really, really cold and we all need to heat our homes. So your guess is as good as mine, but my guess would be energy prices will be high this winter. So we're all going to find out real soon enough come winter. Also, too, there is a debate on Wall Street about what to think about big tech. And this is interesting because I talk about Apple quite a bit, which I think is sort of one of the most important stock, if not the most important stock in the stock market. The basic gist of it is that Apple is a tech stock, yes, but it's also a consumer stock because essentially they got to sell iPhones, right? And that really, really matters in terms of like, let's say in Europe, if things cost a lot of money, do you think they're also going to be buying iPhones? And let me get to the point where I think it's fun for you guys who are haters of the channel or lovers of the channel. I was wrong and right on something with Apple. And the basic gist of it depends how you want to read it. So last time we talked about this, when Apple did their presentation, I was saying that Apple did not raise their prices. So that's not entirely true. Apple did not raise their prices in the USA. That I read the American news. So all the headlines were like, Apple didn't raise iPhone prices. I was like, oh, okay, they didn't raise prices. Someone messaged me from Europe and said, no, actually it was headlines all over Europe that Apple was raising prices. So it's kind of funny. It depends which news you read, but I do want to give you a complete reading on the news. So in terms of Apple, they're raising prices in some markets, UK, Australia, Japan, and Germany, but they're not raising prices in China or the USA. And please correct me if I'm wrong in these things, but this is how I read it. I'm just reading it right here. China iPhone prices will remain the same. Also, too, if you guys take a look at this, this is what their last earnings report, and it goes over sort of like how much money they make from each region and where they make their money. So in terms of net sales, Apple's been like this for a long time. Their net sales, like iPhone is like their biggest category. It's huge. Next comes services. So essentially, if Apple had a choice, I think they would only sell us a bunch of phones, sell us a bunch of services on said phones, and just quit making everything else. I'm just saying if they had a choice. But unfortunately, there's some pesky people like myself who like to use Apple computers and Apple software and stuff like that. And we're like always demanding new stuff. So it's sort of like, I think it's funny these days. I think Apple is like selling computers in order to sell more phones, but phones is a key part of their business. The other thing is too is like in terms of where they sell these things. So USA is their biggest market. So Europe is actually in terms of sales is their second biggest, and then you can say China is their third. However, China is outgrowing or was or is, who knows exactly right now. China was outgrowing Europe by leaps and bounds because their economy was growing, and so then China was always the more important than Europe. But now, who knows what's going to happen, right? Because you have a slowdown in Europe and you have a slowdown in China. But at the end of the day, though, I mean, Apple wants to sell things everywhere. However, just to be fair, this is kind of interesting. If you take a look at this, just think about this. They're raising prices in UK, raising prices in Japan, Australia, and Germany, but they're not raising prices in China. So that makes me, when I see this, it makes me think like, well, maybe they're really concerned about the Chinese consumer. If they raise prices, then people don't want to buy them anymore. Also, too, to take into consideration, when they are raising prices, though, just be aware they're raising by local currency in other countries. And remember that dollar is really strong and other currencies are weak. So even though they are raising prices in, say, Japan, the net may end up being the same because of currency exchange. Just be aware of that. Also, too, when you talk about China, we always talk about China in this channel, is that it's really interesting. They're upping as a word. They're upping their space program here, and they're actually looking to go to the moon and find water and helium-3, which is something that for those of you who are way more spacey than me, Please write in the comments, how important is helium-3? I know it's important, but I'll have to do a separate video on that and really dig and research, because I just don't know right at the top of my head, but I know it is important. The other thing is too is that I believe that our Artemis launch had a couple basically cancellations. I don't know if they're still doing that or not. We'll check on that. But one of the things that was really interesting, I remember it was like a month ago, there was someone in our military was basically saying that this sort of Chinese military or Chinese space program was tying them together. And China came out hitting as like, oh, if you're accusing our space program of being involved with the military, then you're basically, accusing us of doing a new Cold War kind of thing. So there will be some tensions on who can get to the moon first. And right now, China is making, I'm not saying they're beating us, but I'm just saying they are making moves to get to the moon, which is pretty interesting. Also, too, we're seeing a slowdown in Asian real estate. Now, Asia could be a big place. If you want to include Australia, Australia is usually considered Oceania, I believe is how you rate that. But my understanding, though, is that many countries around the world are in a real estate bubble. I mentioned Australia because I keep seeing news of like Australian real estate prices are just crashing or coming down quickly. And then also in China, you also have the whole fiasco with what's going on with the real estate developers over there, and sort of basically the domino of people not paying their mortgages and money's not flowing around the system. However, it does show that housing prices are cooling. I'm in Korea, as you guys know. I can just tell you here, housing prices have been elevated. They've been elevated for years. And we all think it's a bubble, but like, when's the bubble going to pop? And it never does. And it's kind of the same thing with like real estate in LA. Also, too, you can see here, this is an interesting one. Prices of airfares in Australia. It is really affected sort of immigration. This is a story about immigration. And I've talked about this before on the channel in the USA. Here's the gist of it. I'll give you a real simple way to think about it. Chinese people, there's a lot of Chinese people, you guys know this, and Chinese people actually send their kids to go to university all around the world. Those university dollars is worth quite a bit of money to universities all around the world. Also, too, Chinese tourism is worth a lot of money to a lot of people. And so then, like, during COVID, when essentially Chinese tourists couldn't go anywhere, and you can make the case for other tourists, but China, let's talk about China because that is a big country and they have a lot of money flowing. It hurt a lot of countries that depended on essentially either Chinese students or Chinese tourism to come and bring money to the economy. Also, too, regarding workers, not just China, you could argue India as well. India sends a lot of workers around the world. If you guys know, here, I keep saying here, but in the USA, there's a ton of Chinese and Indian workers in tech. And so it was interesting to read about how Australia was actually affected by this as well, because I know the Americans are affected 100%, but to read about Australia was something that they're still recovering from. Like, can we get the country open? Can we get oil prices down? I mean, it's not really something that Australia can control, but can we get things down to where we can get more people and get our economy functioning again? Also, too, which is really important as well, we're having a drought, and actually, and I didn't know this, it was both. It's California and China, actually. I've read about the China one before, but now I'm just seeing and I'll point this out to you guys. I'm seeing this, I guess, in California. They're having trouble with their rice production because there's just not enough water. And in China, the lack of water is showing that the weakness of hydropower, because if you depend on hydropower to have heat and air conditioning, then that certainly, if the water is like not, what's the right word to say, not constant or not reliable, it is renewable, but not necessarily reliable. It shows the weakness with hydro. And also, too, is like, if you have to choose between, say, in California, for example, do I want to use my water to be power, or do I want to use my water to, grow crops? Which we rather have, air conditioning or food? I think we choose food first, but for some people, maybe, power is life, which I don't disagree, right? Because I love my internet, I love my air conditioning, I love my phones, et cetera, et cetera. So regardless, though, end of the day, is we have an energy problem. And I think you guys know this. I talk about so much on this channel, but it was very interesting, though, how when you think about how the importance of water, both in terms of energy and in terms of food. The last thing here is that the scientists, this is just an article I was reading through, they've discovered that, clean air is important because dirty air can cause lung cancer. It's nothing shocking or anything like that, but it's interesting because here in Korea, my wife and I will be moving actually just in a few days, so we get our new place soon, but we recently bought some air cleaners for the house. They're basically like the units you put in your house, and a lot of Koreans do this, and like in USA, we don't really do that, like an air filtration system that you put in your living room. We don't really do that kind of thing, but it is a common thing that people do here in Korea, and I think they probably do it in China as well, and most likely China. I haven't been to Japan for a while, but I just wanted to reiterate this to you guys, like something like this kind of thing is not really a big issue in terms of retail sales or regular consumers buying essentially what there are, they're like units. There's like a, think of it like a, like think of it like the size of like a small refrigerator you put in your living room to clean the air in your house. Basically, air pollution's a real thing. And for people who always deny it and always like, what are you talking about? I want clean air, I want clean water, and this is something important. And this is sort of like going back to where this topic come from, is about energy. And the issue always is like, okay, we need energy to power our homes and power, our world essentially, but at what cost to the environment? And I think this is a real important question. And this chart shows you here is like, what kind of energy do we use? And so we're still using coal, right? I'm looking at the chart right here. And actually solar is very, very small part, a small portion of what energy we use. Wind is a very, very small part as well. So like coal, natural gas is very, very high actually. And so is hydro. You guys can see the numbers. This is just a chart of like, where does electricity come from? The one thing that I think is really interesting though is that what are we going to do about nuclear powers, slash uranium? But where is the world going to go in that? Because there is a possibility. I do see a world where suddenly people start talking about nuclear a whole bunch, because even though I think solar should be the future, solar, like water, isn't necessarily dependable. Just think, for example, that you have a whole bunch of cloudy days in a row, and suddenly, it's hard to use. So I'm just saying, just for example, and it depends on like, which part of the world you live in, or just say, for example, some parts of the world, they're not going to get enough wind to have reliable wind power. So I think I do preach alternative energy all the time on this channel, and I do believe in it, but I am acknowledging that the water one's an interesting one, because what if you have a drought? Then suddenly your whole water energy infrastructure is all gone. So, in whole, I think the dream would be like, how can we develop clean energy so that we're not getting lung cancer? And also, how can we have reliable energy? So always love to have discussions on the technology of energy. And believe me, guys, I'm right there with you with developing new tech. I say it so many times, I think the Americans should develop new alternative energy tech. Develop these strong things, not depend on other countries, and then sell that tech all around the world. And I think that's very, very American, to profit off entrepreneurship and also profit off science. I think all these things are related, but I'm also showing you that this chart's really interesting, how there's multiple energy factors in there. So I know I talk a whole bunch about energy, but it is a thing. So anyway, so hopefully this is helpful and useful for you. Love to hear your thoughts about what's going on with Apple. In your opinion, then, since Apple is raising prices in those markets, why do you think they're doing that? I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on that. And also, too, what do you think about water as a source of energy? Is that something that can be relied on? And love to hear what's going on in your neck of the woods. So thanks, everyone, for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.